Hello, everyone. Um, I'd like to talk about how open source basically works. This would just be a pretty fast and pretty simple presentation. Mainly, I'd just like to share my own experience as someone that's, I'd say, not that special, as someone that's a pretty average developer, and my experience with open source contributing, specifically in Pandas, a very, I guess, popular library for working with data in Python. Okay. How it started? Well, honestly, at that time, around last year, I was kind of too lazy to create a new project, like starting from scratch. And I'm honestly also pretty lazy to maintain my existing projects. So, but even though I'm too lazy, I have this feeling that I want to do something productive, something that can hopefully further increase my knowledge, overall experience, and that's where I kind of landed into thinking, trying to contribute to open source. And since it's usually recommended to kind of contribute to a project that you're used to or you're mainly working with, since Pandas is one of the libraries I first learned, I tried using or taking a dive in to contributing into Pandas. Honestly, since we see Pandas as somewhat very large project, there's a lot of functions, a lot of documentation regarding its different functions and implementations. But actually contributing is pretty easy. As you can see, my first PR here was actually just a one-line fix in a documentation. So from this one line, I could already say that I'm a Pandas contributor, by the way. But yeah, kidding aside, aside from fixing documentation, mostly you will work on, would be adding and improving tests on existing functions or if there are new changes. Also, mainly bug fixes as well as performance improvements and et cetera, et cetera. How does it work? How does one start contributing to open source? Well, thankfully, we've got a pretty useful website right here. It's goodfirstissue.dev. In this website, you can actually see a list of mainly very popular repositories that have a number here which contains kind of technically easy issues. That's why it's called Good First Issue. It contains, on the first one, AMPT HTML contains 4 good, easy issues. And as someone starting out, you could first try working on these good first issues. Mostly these good first issues were something that I've shared earlier, just a simple fix in the documentation. And from there, you could start step by step and trying out different types and different complications in the issues. After that, after checking out an issue in goodfirstissue.dev, of course, something that's very important is we have to follow and properly read the documentation or the kind of contributing documentation. I know it's pretty boring at first, but it will help you with the initial setup, with the kind of coding standards on the repository, as well as best practices. Usually when someone barges in and just, creates a solution from not following anything, not having any linters, just creating a new file, not following like the specific project structure, it just gets automatically rejected by the maintainers. And we have to follow this contributing and setup documentation so that the open source projects becomes much more easier to work on. It becomes more feature-proof for future improvements. And then, after that, you've read and set up your own environment, You could start working on an issue depending on a repository that you're working on. It doesn't have to be Pandas specifically, or it doesn't even have to be Python specifically. And after choosing an issue, you have to follow the coding standards of the repository. And usually, once you opened a PR in the repository, there would be CI unit tests that would validate your PR and your changes. And what you want to do there is you want to fix it if there are errors based on the CI. In this way, you wouldn't have to wait for a maintainer to review your code. Because usually what happens is, if there's an error in the CI, the maintainer would just reply to your PR to say that, please fix this CI issue, since it has to pass all tests to make sure that it's 100% working, all functions are working. And you just repeat the last step until approved. Once you fix the CI errors, if there are comments by the maintainer to be changed, you also will have to work on that as well. My experience, I mainly just work in Pandas. I really had fun in this repository, or in this contributing in this project, since the project's very sentimental, somewhat sentimental to me, since it's something that most of the time I worked with, since I worked with a lot of data. So here's my favorite PR, a performance improvement to data frame.toCSV function when index is equals to false. I think this is a very popular function where this does is it just outputs the current data frame into a CSV file. Now, the problem here was that even though index by default the parameter is index equals to true, what happens is if index is equals to false, the operation time is still the same. And that's pretty weird, because if you add index equals false, it should be much more faster, since you're not building the index to be outputted by the CSV file. Now, I find this is my favorite PR, because it actually, I only changed, as you can see here, a couple of lines. And the changes was around 10 times the speed. So from on this test, from 869 seconds, it became 251 seconds. So here to explain this change that I did, it was just pretty simple. This ix variable just builds, or this is the variable that's getting used when building the indices to be outputted into the CSV file. Now, I just added here that an if function, that if cells and levels is not equal to 0, which is equivalent to index is equals to false. Just don't build this self.data index and just create an empty array, since you would drop it anyways. So from this, I had improved the two CSV function by around 10% when index is equals to false. And yeah, it's pretty much my favorite as well, since it's one of the functions that I use a lot as well. Also, this is something that's pretty funny that I saw while kind of taking a look at some issues. Here, I was looking at an issue and I was asking the assignee if he was still working on this issue. And he replied, the Rockstar DBA, yes, he's submitting a PR soon. And then some minutes later, there comes Devin. And he kind of stole this. He kind of opened an PR and kind of, kind of jokingly stole this issue from the Rockstar DBA. And I don't know, I just found this funny, since it's kind of devs getting replaced by AI in real life. And yeah, So why should you do it? Why should you contribute to open source? Um, in this picture, there's an example of this. An example of this would be the XZUtil backdoor. If you're familiar with that, it's a pretty popular backdoor, I think last year, wherein what happened was there was only one maintainer that got pressured into working with on the open source package XZ, which led to two suspicious collaborators implementing a backdoor to XZ. So open source projects are very important since most of them are just maintained by, I don't know, small team, and then they're kind of a very integral part of our infrastructure. And for me, it's contributing to open source was my favorite part of my resume. If you ask me what was my kind of something that I'm pretty proud of in my CV and in my resume, even though I've worked with a lot of complex things, this is something that I'm pretty proud of, and I'm something that I'm pretty enthusiastic talking about. Also, you kind of get experience and get collaboration that even though you're not working, pretty much almost, let's say, 99% of companies use Git. And for me, I think that's something that's not too discussed as well in schools, how to properly use Git commands, and how to properly collaborate with Git or in GitHub. And from contributing to open source, you kind of get that experience that it's very helpful once you have work. So this is helpful for people that are in their early careers or for students, since you get to know and you get to further improve your experience with Git. Aside from that, you will learn how to properly debug CIs, the common terms of Git, and just overall improve Git knowledge. Personally, I have learned a lot new functions and a lot new things thanks to open source contribution in terms of Git. Most of these advantages will be mainly useful for people that are early in their career. So you get to work with large files. If you're still a student or someone that has no work experience yet, you get to kind of see and trace back different variables from multiple files, where this function goes and stuff like that. It feels like you're working as a volunteer and you feel connected with the community. In Pandas, there's a Slack channel and there are meetings every week regarding kind of this, the direction of Pandas. You get in-depth experience with the project. You also become updated with the current issues, feature plans of the project, kind of working with future versions or working with backport compatibilities from past versions. And you improve your understanding in documentation. This is something that's pretty important as well. We have to be, we have to learn how to understand documentation well. And one of the best things as well here is, since this is open source and no one's really paid here, you're not really required to contribute, or you could just dive into an issue, open a PR, and you could just don't finish it. No one's really gonna hate you for that. The maintainers would just close your PR and then go back reviewing other PRs. There's also no pressure. I have worked with PRs where my past commit was 2 weeks ago, and yeah, that's what's good in this as well, since you could really manage your time, since there's really no pressure for this. For me, disadvantages. Environment setup hell. Initially, when you start in open source contribution, mostly you will work on feature versions. usually versions that are not yet released. So there are times that I had issues with kind of working with Pandas 3.0 and then trying to go back to the latest version of Pandas to do my work, or trying a past version of Pandas, like the overall dependencies. But I guess you would say that it's an advantage as well, since once you solve it out or learn it out, that's great knowledge as well, since you would get experience with setting up virtual environments. It's easy, but it's not something that's easy that somewhat you could just plow through. You still have to use somewhat your brain cells, or you still have to put in your effort. You still have to look at documentations. You still have to check forums for errors that you found. And lastly, you have to follow coding standards based on the project's documentation. So TLDR, contributing to open source despite being kind of volunteer work still has a lot of advantages. You get kind of work experience without actually working, without having the pressure of the deadlines and overall pressure of something that you're not used to. You also get experience. It's a good addition to your resume. It's also fulfilling, since you're kind of contributing to something that everyone or a lot of people uses, and you're trying to contribute to the greater kind of good of the project. You get in-depth knowledge on the project, and improve tracing back in terms of like large files and multiple file projects. And that's all for me. I hope I convinced a couple of people here to try and contribute to open source. And if anyone has questions in specifics to contributing to Pandas, you can reach out to me here in LinkedIn or in GitHub.
Hello, Kevin. I'm Carlo. And first of all, thanks for your presentation. Just like you, many maintainers encourage beginners to get involved in open source. However, some argue that inexperienced contributors may introduce low-quality code, create extra work for maintainers. Given this, how can beginners contribute effectively to open source without hurting it?
Yeah, thanks. I do agree with that. Actually, if you're familiar with Hacktoberfest, there's some maintainers that hate Hacktoberfest, since when it's Hacktoberfest, a lot of people try to open shit PRs in different repositories, not following coding standards and documentation. That's why in my presentation, I really emphasized and I really highlighted the importance of reading the documentation as well as following the coding standards of that repository. I'd like to end with a quote that kind of not doing what you want or doing what you're used to would be good today, but following coding standards or following the documentation of the repository would be good tomorrow. It would be good for kind of future-proofing of the project for future collaborations.
Do we have any more questions? Feel free to approach the mics.
Hi, my name's Ned. So first of all, it's refreshing to see someone who contributed like just I think 4 lines of code and made a big difference. So it's refreshing to see like that, although others don't understand that. But my question is, do you have any other projects have you contributed to in the open source, or did you just contributed solely on Pandas? That's my question.
Thanks. I was looking at a lot of projects as well. I've tried contributing to a package called LazyGit. It's not yet popular. It's not LazyGit. It's LazySQL. It's not a popular package yet, and it's kind of somewhat still very early, in its early stages. I've also tried looking at other repositories like Vim, but overall, Pandas is the one that I'm very comfortable with contributing to. Thank you.
Hi, Kevin. I'm Dan. I don't speak in behalf of any company, but I think we do recognize that there are many companies who doesn't have good QA policies enforced, right? So would you agree that companies should follow the open source contributing or the community health files that enforces these types of policies like code of conduct, etc.?
I think that would be very dependent on the project. But on my case, aside from, I've also kind of copied some of the CI, how the CI unit tests work in open source projects. But I would say it's very dependent on the project. But aside from QA, it's also, I also used kind of the overall best practices in terms of collaboration in open source to the company that I'm working on. So it was very helpful with that.
Any more questions, guys? Feel free to just go up to the mics. I have a question. If you're someone who hasn't contributed to open source yet, you were saying about following coding standards. If you don't have a specific package that you want to contribute to yet, do you have any suggestions of any like coding standards documentation online that someone can start reading up on that's not specific to one project, or something that can be like transferable anywhere?
I think if you're not yet if you haven't had much experience in some packages, or you're not yet sure which packages to contribute to, I would suggest that you kind of focus first on trying to see what projects you like, and from working on that projects, trying to see what libraries have you used the most, and kind of work from there. Because you have to have experience first in that package, or it's recommended to have experience first, or you have been working on that specific project or that specific library before kind of contributing to it.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions? Any questions, guys? We have 5 minutes. If not, we can let Kevin go sit down, relax. Oh.
Hello. Hi, Kevin. I'm Arnel. I run DurianPy, the Python user group of Davao. So I was really interested in your experience in contributing to this major Python package, right? I was wondering if you were interested in flying over to Davao and maybe run a sprint there.
Honestly, I'd love to do that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk later.
All right, thank you.
Working works. Any other questions? Anyone want to invite Kevin somewhere? Any of our international friends want to invite Kevin to submit? I know PyCon Japan just opened their call for proposals for PyCon this year. Any more questions, guys? Any last words, Kevin, or you have 5 minutes?
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everyone.